Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everything is doing alright this afternoon. I had a weird technical problem trying to get back on, but it seems like everything is working, so let's call it a day and keep this thing a show or ticking. Tomorrow, I'm having a birthday bash. Calling it a birthday bash because it has alliteration in the two words birthday and bash. I love those. But nevertheless, it's going to be a birthday bash. It's going to be at 5 p.m. tomorrow. You're all welcome to it. It is also going to be the time for my patron appreciation. So at that birthday bash, the birthday bash will be the patron appreciation. The show is going to go about an hour or two, and I'm going to have multiple news stories as I go through the 2 hours. So there's that. That is going to be saved purely for the patrons, even though it's going to be open for everyone to come and watch and come and see. Now, that said, I made notice to the video prior that people who assist with PayPal, I need to find a way to allow them to also see it. But nevertheless, I'm trying to do more shows for patrons or people who contribute to help the show, and that will be held for them. So there's that. Now, saying that, on the last episode, I missed a very funny message sent by Balthazar. Jake fact-check.oops tapper. He wanted to fact check that McCain was the greatest politician for peace ever and the greatest soldier for our defense. We called Brian Williams and he confirmed that John made him nut his pants multiple times. Fact-check.oops tapper. Hashtag not porn name. These are funny because these take a little bit of backstory. If you remember, Brian Williams, Donald Trump said that dead babies bothered him, missing the point that Donald Trump had a lot of dead babies on his conscience at the point where Donald Trump was talking about the dead babies bothering him. Donald Trump, without having any evidence, without having any, anything that makes what he was talking about make his claim real, said that the Syrian government did a chemical weapons strike. We find out later that they had no evidence to that. That even Mattis himself said they didn't have any evidence that Bashar al-Assad did it. It didn't stop Donald Trump from launching weapons and military strikes. We found out later from the OPCW that there was no chemical weapons used in that, and what they found amounted organic phosphates. You could have organic phosphates in your house right now. Brian Williams, in watching the United States launch an illegal missile strike, a strike that killed other human beings, people who had wives, mothers, people who had kids, people who had a life that wanted and thought they were going to go to work the next day, because military service, just like military service in this country, is a job. Military service in that country is their job. And if you want to say that it's a noble pursuit in this country, then you also have to say it's a noble pursuit in the other country. We murdered their people. Brian Williams, in pursuit of this, wasn't being a newsman. He didn't ask, where's the evidence? He didn't say, is it legal for the President of the United States to launch a missile strike in this way? He didn't do any of that. The light of our missiles, I'm guided by the light of our missiles. And he wet himself as he watched this, giving poetry as the United States President launches an illegal missile strike that ended up killing other human beings. Balthazar, your tweets require a little bit of backstory, but the backstory is well-founded. The gentleman behind me is Jack Fresco. Jack Fresco, among a few others, have done Howard Zinn being one, Chomsky being another, informing my world workable point of view. How do I look at the world? How do I process the world? How do I process information? Why do I come to one conclusion versus another? Why do I think about this one way as opposed to the other? What is the stake that I put into the ground that allows me to say or do any particular thing or espouse a particular opinion? Fresco was one of those people that assisted in the workable point of view that I came across away with the world. When I grew up, people would have kids would wear certain clothing. They would wear certain shoes. This person would have Nikes. This person would have Reeboks. Oh, that guy couldn't afford it, so we get to pick on that guy who couldn't afford that particular name brand shoe. Missing the fact that the shoes are doing the exact same thing. The branding of it is just the branding of it. You're paying $100 for essentially one name brand as opposed to another shoe. All of the shoes do the same thing. By the same token, when you get of a particular age, as you get older, those things stay in your head, and you tend to continue to back up a particular brand, still eat at a particular market, with this idea that one is better than the other, or one is more fashionable, or one is something else. Once they get you as a kid, they have you for the rest of your life. It's not easy to necessarily break out of that thinking. The catch for that, though, is that's a point of view. That's a workable point of view, even though the people don't realize it's a workable point of view in the way they're looking at the world. Advertisement is not the thing in of itself. If I'm getting something to eat, am I getting something to eat because I'm hungry? No, I'm saying this wrong. Let's start at a different place. Let's talk about technology. Let's talk about technology. I wasn't originally going to do this show, but Late Bluebird is right. I've gotten so dark in some of the content because I guess my feeling is there's certain things that I focus on. I look at this stuff from a humanitarian point of view. And if I think human beings are suffering, being hurt, being injured, that's where my point of view goes. Those are the things that my point of view says, hey, we need to focus on this. We need to pay attention to this. If they're ramping up for war in Syria, my focus is, oh my God, they're talking about killing a lot of people. We need to focus on them talking about killing a lot of people. That's the way I look at the world. That's the way I process it. But from the standpoint of end goal, I do think we should look at higher things. I do think one of the benefits of like Star Trek, Next Generation, was this is what the world could look like when we get past where we are now. We're in prehistory. And at some point, where human beings get to the point where they look back at all of this fuckery as those people were fucking insane. And part of this insanity has to do with these odd religious beliefs from the standpoint of capitalism. Yeah, I think a lot of our problems boil down to this idea of a profit motive. We've had enough wealth over the last year to get rid of poverty 7 times over. Think about that. We're the richest country on the planet. And there are areas of this country that have been, where the UN has considered to be essentially waste zones, where people are living in squalor. You have a large section of the population, in fact, the majority, living at the margins, meaning barely making ends meet, or even though they're making ends meet, they're in this kind of debt peonage. Why do you want to live that way? People would argue and fight for capitalism, missing the fact that they were born, raised, had things implicit and explicitly put into them in a particular system, propagandized to for the entirety of their life as if that system is the greatest thing on the planet. And they would argue with you as if they were arguing from a disposition of this is their choice, missing the fact that choice had nothing to do with this, that they were propagandized to from the time they were kids to now, and those things were invested and shoved into them. That this is the greatest system on the planet, this is all there is, and for the entirety of their life, the only thing that they know is this system. They're arguing for something that they've been essentially propagandized into. They never had a choice of the matter. The arguments is purely from a disposition of being the stuff rammed into them. It is a different thing to pull yourself out and ask yourself the question of, is it fair? Is it fair that 1% own the majority of the resources? I don't think so. Is it fair that you have a system where the poverty can be gotten rid of 7 times over? Not so much. Everything from the standpoint of wealth that is held onto at this point was at some point stolen and taken. Enshrining this stuff into law and allowing this stuff to kind of propagate itself where one section of the population starts to dominate because of the amount of wealth it has seems to be a nonsensical proposition to me. Why is it okay for one section of the population to own the overwhelming majority of the resources, not to mention how we accrue those resources? So you have this weird situation where electricity or power is ruled by essentially a group of people who just want to maximize their profit. Why? I'm asking you something very basic about our system and the way we've organized ourselves. Is it fair? We can get rid of poverty. We can get rid of war. All of those things at this point is purely a choice. Is this really the system to which you want to propagate into? And is this a system that you believe will be sustainable? There's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet. Take everything else off the table. Talking about climate change by itself, there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. We're looking at a situation where what we consider to be our habitable space of living is breaking down. The capitalist class don't take this into consideration when they go about their affairs. They can externalize the pain, the problems. There's supposed to be more plastic in the ocean by 2050 than fish. Think about that. That's insane. You're talking about the quality of our food going down because of the amount of carbon that's being dumped into the air. That is utterly insane. You're talking about the jet stream shutting down. You're talking about an Arctic free of ice. And that doesn't even get into issues of social inequality, where wealth gap increases, where the quality of life and even life itself, meaning the difference in age range between, let's say, the top class and the people who are not in that top class is like 15 years. People dying earlier because not having access to the things that they need, or at the very least being in some kind of social strata where they realize that they're at the bottom end of that strata. All of this is a choice. All of this is choice. Choice to a degree. What I mean by choice to a degree is going back to kind of when I was a kid. You're raised into this thing where they get you as a child and they have you for the rest of your life believing that you're making conscious decisions when they had you as a child. Your workable point of view was essentially informed and created as you were a child and as you grew up, with small incremental modifications that moves you to point A to point B, but no grand sweeping changes in the way that you see the world and the way that you see ourselves organized. I know this one has been kind of all over the place because this one wasn't all that planned. Fresco has taken this extra step of asking the question of, what should the world look like if you had a choice? Should technology be used for the benefit of humanity, or should technology be used for the benefit of the top 1%? That answer, of course, is technology should be used for the benefit of humanity. Sometimes it's the problems that give way to the answers. We have technological innovation that is taking place in our society that is making work more and more redundant, or let's say unnecessary, at least from the standpoint of having the way we used to go about our factory jobs. So companies like Uber gets automated cars. I say good. I don't want a person behind the wheel of a car doing a mundane job if they don't have to do a mundane job. If a robot can do it better, let a robot do it better. Just like the elevator man saying, I don't want an elevator being driven automatically by itself going up and down. Well, the elevator man may say that, but within a few years after that elevator man leaves, everybody considers this to be the normal way, and everybody's happy that the elevator man is no longer going up and down that elevator. Horse and buggy. Horse and buggy is better than a car. Technological innovation makes it somewhat irrelevant for you to have a horse driving a buggy in this way. Technology changes the way we go about and organize ourselves. And yes, it can be rough, but technology is some degree neutral. It is the perspective and the culture that makes it otherwise. To some degree, this is a problem of culture, and the culture tends to propagate itself. We get accustomed to things. Them getting you as a kid to use Nike or Fila or whatever shoe, it's not all that different than the way we go about our affairs as human beings. Maybe not necessarily Nike and Fila, but just in general, we make small incremental changes to our lives, but never big changes, and never to a degree where we, as a society, make a choice on how we want to go about our affairs. I'm saying that needs to change. At some point, we need to make a choice, and that choice needs to be, let's use technology for the benefit of humanity, not necessarily for the benefit of the 1%. Yeah, I'm not gonna keep this one longer. Fresco is amazing on this point because Fresco nails this point in an amazing way. All right, good. I'm back. There's something weird going on with the internet here, and I'm not sure what's going on. I was taken off the air entirely early on, and I was trying to get back on and couldn't get back on. All right, I'm going to end this here because I don't know how long the signal is going to last. I will be back for more, but your world can be whatever you want your world to be. That's all I'm getting at. That's the main point. I think if Fresco was still here and people asked them, how do you get to that point? Because that's always the question. Yeah, the world could be different. Yes, I want my flying car. Yes, I want the capacity to go from point A to point B in this hypersonic way. But how do you do it? How do you do it? I think Fresco would tell you that the world would have to come to an end before the world gets to the point of change. Unfortunately, I think Fresco is right. That doesn't necessarily mean I stop pushing and fighting for positive things. But there's something to be said, however, and maybe the way to do a video like this is to just go through. Yeah, let me rethink this video. I don't like this video. And so I'm going to kill this video. I'm going to delete this video. And I'm going to do a Fresco video that's a little bit more right. This was kind of on the spur of the moment because Late Bluebird brought up the Fresco thing. And I agree with her because I thought my content has been getting dark. Like, not intentionally, just like you bring up issues, things that you consider to be plagues and things that you don't particularly like. And as you're pointing to it, it's like, oh my God, this is a war. Oh my God, this may lead to a war. Oh my God, this guy has just, or this group has just taken over this particular thing. There's going to be killing involved. And it's like, how do you not look at that? You almost have to. And as a left-wing channel, but that doesn't necessarily mean I can't necessarily do beautiful things. And Late Bluebird, I agree with you. I'm going to do a video on Fresco that would do Fresco right. This one is not it. I don't like this video. So I'm going to kill this one. It's dark because the USA is dark. Yeah, I know. All right, so I'm going to kill this. I'll be back in a few minutes, going back with the regular scheduled one. Late Bluebird, I would do a Fresco one that's more in akin to Fresco. This just wasn't necessarily the one I thought I was going to do. I didn't have one in mind, and I thought I was just going to kind of go for it. But I hate this. I don't like this video. Yeah, and I don't mind saying I hate my videos. It depends on the video. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to kill this. I will be back with a little bit more glorious video. Not at this very moment. I still have other dark videos that I'm going to do. I'm sorry, Late Bluebird. But I agree with you on this. I agree with you. The shows have gotten dark. And I think back. It's like this. I sit here perched and look over the world. And of all the things to do stories on, I get lost into, okay, which one do you want to do a story on? And you ask the question, what do people want to see? In addition to, what am I interested in? My basic human standing point, I always say I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist, I'm not anything. I'm a humanitarian. If I'm going to ascribe to anything, it's because I don't like to defend any of that stuff. Like this idea of Venezuela is falling apart. Are you going to defend socialism in Venezuela? No, why? I'm not a socialist. Will I defend certain things if I think those things are right from a standpoint of humanity? Yes. That's my staking around. That's where I look at the world from. Is this helping or hurting humanity? Are people better off or less off? What is the motivations of the people involved in this? If I'm sitting on the moon looking at this, how would I think about it? The beauty of Fresco is that Fresco, in an odd way, I would argue, simultaneously yanks himself out of the system and looks at it, while at the same token being inspired by his ideas from being in the system itself. I mean, based on Fresco's own ideology, people are robots. Now, I don't think people are fully entirely robots, but people are robots. That how they are is by virtue of where they come from and the experiences to which those people they encountered. So you can kind of see how to learn. If how people are purely inspired by what those people encounter, and you have a society that seeks to propagate itself by essentially instigating itself into people, saying that society is great, that society is awesome, and those people are indoctrinated with propaganda from the time they are children to the time they are drop dead, then how do you extricate people from a system to look at that system critically, and to look at that system from outside of itself, when all of the edifices of the system, or at the very least the overwhelming majority of the edifice of the system, seeks to propagate it and seeks to instill a certain ideology into the individuals that are there? For example, John McCain. John McCain drops dead. Everybody from the mainstream media is chest stomping how awesome and a great human being John McCain was, missing the fact that John McCain was a warmonger. What has gotten across to people growing up in this society? If you look at the life of John McCain, simultaneously seeing all of this accolades for a warmonger, it is difficult to see how society changes. That's all. Like when people are talking to Fresco, they're always asking them, yeah, but how do you change it? How do you change it? How do you change it? That's not an answer that Fresco has. And if anything, what Fresco would probably say is it's going to collapse first. It will have to come to a halt, meaning all of it fails, not partially fail, but thoroughly fails. Many of these other systems ended in war. So the Civil War was the thing that ended slavery. I don't know the thing that ended feudalism. But you can say maybe the previous monarchs, those were ended in World War I and World War II, where you had this kind of new way of going about your affairs. Who the hell knows what it would take to end the current system that we have now? And will that end in a whimper, or will that end in some kind of cataclysmic thing? I have a hard time believing that the 1% will give up control of the things that they have peacefully. That's all. So think of something like I like the idea that people can go on their cell phone and say, send me a car, and they get in the car and go. How much time does people's cars just spend sitting around doing nothing? Do you need that many cars? Assume for the moment that all of these people who have cars, I think like 90% of the time those cars just sit doing nothing. Assume for the moment that there were just less cars. Maybe you don't need that many cars. Maybe you need just enough cars where a person can say, I need to go from point A to point B, and it takes them, as opposed to making a bunch of cars that spend 90% of their time doing nothing. I'm saying we need a different way in going about our affairs if we're going to acknowledge that there are environmental challenges that we need to deal with, and if we're going to acknowledge that dealing with humanity is of the utmost importance. If you want to cut down crime, poverty, war, those are not things that you're going to do under a capitalistic system. Just saying. The moment that you have a profit motive, and the moment that you have these things where you're going to have this kind of gamesmanship and a fighting for resources, you're going to have conflict. But either way, I'm going to kill this because I hate this video. Late Bluebird, I would do a video dealing with Fresco, and it would be something specific and something I can think of in advance. Yeah, the Venus Project, Mark Benjamin, the Venus Project. They seem to be losing their grip. They do seem to be losing their grip. But they seem to be losing their grip because they've jumped the shark in regards to how much they've started to take. I mean, you have a world where people realize that wealth has accrued magnificently. And in realizing that wealth has accrued in that way, the world understands that the top 1% has done immensely well while they themselves have struggled. This is not, I don't think, the bottom. I think this is dealing with the middle. Ultimately, the top bribes the middle to shut the fuck up about how bad things are at the bottom. The wider that the bottom gets, the more antsy. There's going to be an inflection point where you no longer have enough of the middle to back up the top. The moment that the bribery of the middle erodes, then you have a change. The question becomes, what is that point and when is that change? Nobody knows. But let me end this. All right. I apologize for the fuckery of this video. This was at the last minute, but I will be back in like 10 minutes. All right, guys. See you shortly.